The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast and Ordinary People's Extraordinary Stories. I've got an amazing guest on today, so without too much further ado, let's bring him in. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you bringing me on
No,
your
you
show,
are
man.
absolutely most welcome. I'm looking forward to this little parlay that we're going to have today. But let's start off. So, Dave, if you can tell me when and where you were born, if you can describe to me what it was like where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received, and
Okay.
the floor is yours.
All right. Well, again, thanks for having me, Tim. I'm really honored to be on your show. Let's see. I was born at Queen of Angels Hospital in Hollywood, California, and I was born to a single mother. What happened is my biological father, 2 months before I was born, Tim, we don't know exactly what happened, but he hurt his head. He was a pilot in Korea, and all we know is that he hurt his head, and to save his life, they put a plate in his head. And he complained to my mom all the time about how much pain he was in because of that plate. And he made reference to he didn't know how much longer he could take it. And so 2 months before I was born, he told mom he was going to the grocery store, and we never saw or heard from him again. So when I was born to a single mom, and she already had 2 boys. So now she had 3. And she was living in a 1-bedroom apartment with her mother, my grandmother, and a cousin of mine. And so all 6 of us were living in this 1-bedroom apartment in Hollywood, California, across the street from Hollywood High School. Well, when I was 5 years old, mom was working at the Roosevelt Hotel, a well-known hotel in Hollywood. She was a server. And mom was, mom knew hard work. She'd grown up through the Depression. She was, I believe she grew up in the generation that saved the world. My parents did, the people of that generation. Because when all the men, when my dad and the men were either in Europe fighting the Nazis, whereas my best friend's dad was in the Navy and he was fighting the Japanese in Pearl Harbor. And so when the men were off fighting this war, guess what the women were doing? Everything. They did. They had to do it all, man. They were home. They built the Jeeps, the tanks, the trucks. My mother was known. They gave her a name. She was known as Rosie the Riveter. And what that meant was she built airplanes for McDonnell Douglas. So, mom grew up in a 8 kids in the family. She was on a farm. You had to sew your own clothes. You had to harvest your own food. Hard work was unlike anything it is today. Hard work was definitely hard work. And so, you never threw anything away back then. If it broke, you fixed it because you didn't have the money to buy a new one. And so anyway, mom was a hard worker, and she worked as hard as she could at that restaurant, at that hotel. But it wasn't enough. And so by the time I was 5 years old, she couldn't feed me. And so what did she do? She did a very, very, very loving thing. And I'm very grateful to her for this. And that is she put me up for adoption. And her sister, my aunt, adopted me. So when I'm 5 years old, I moved from Hollywood, California. I moved to Long Beach, California. Now I'm being raised by my aunt and uncle. Now, I don't know this. I just know at 5 years old, I go from one place to another. So I really don't know, really what transpired. Well, everything was great. We had a wonderful life. My dad that was now raising me, Bob Albin, he was a highly decorated officer in World War II. He was career military. He was in the U.S. Army. He was also in the National Guard. And so we had a nice house. We always had food on the table. We traveled. We went camping. I mean, it was beautiful. It was a wonderful, wonderful life. And then when I was 11 years old, in 1964, the first day of summer, they come and get me, and they said, David, come into the kitchen. We need to tell you something. My mom did, the mother that's raising me, right? And they set me down, and what I thought they were going to do, Tim, is tell me where we were going to go camping that year, because we did a lot of that. We went to Yosemite, we went to Big Bear, Lake Arrowhead, Lake Havasu. We went all over California camping. So I'm thinking that's what they're going to tell me. Well, my mom's got tears in her eyes, and she puts her hand on my arm like this, and she looks at me and she goes, "David, we have something we need to tell you." And I'm like, "Okay, right. I'm 11 years old. What are you going to tell me?" And she said, "Well, what we need to tell you is we're not your parents." What? Well, what do you mean you're not my parent? Of course you're my parents. I mean, you know what I mean? It was extremely confusing to me. Heck, it's still confusing to me to this day. That's like walking outside and seeing the sky's blue, and you go, "Yeah, oh, nope, the sky's not blue." Well, it looks pretty blue to me. And so that started it. Shortly after that happened, by the way, let me back up. When I was 5 and they adopted me, both of them swore off alcohol. So there was no drinking during that whole 6-year period. And shortly after they told me this, they both started drinking. Now, I don't know if they started drinking because of that, of them telling me they weren't my parents. My dad was in and out of the Pentagon, and there was a lot going on in the world back then. In November of '63, the year before, President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. The Bay of Pigs was going on. The missiles were in Cuba, right at our border. Nuclear war was, inches away. So Dad was pretty stressed out. And so I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not. All I know is they both started drinking. And that's when my life took a really hard turn. And things got ugly fast. Bob, who's a wonderful human being when he's sober, was not a wonderful human being when he was drinking. He was the polar opposite. He was not a nice man when he was drinking. Pat, my mom, she wasn't mean or nasty, but it was just infested. It was just horrible when they were both drinking. So, now I'm dealing with that. Well, one day they went to the grocery store. And back then, you could leave your kids home. People did it all the time, right? You're 11 years old, so what? There's no big deal. Families do it all the time. In fact, what moms would do, they just call the neighbor across the street and say, "Hey, Joanne, Bob and I are going to the grocery store. David's home alone. If he needs anything, can he come knock on your door?" "Yeah, of course. Have him come over now. Fix him a fried bologna sandwich," that kind of thing, right? So they left and went to the store. Well, I knew where the booze was. They were hiding it in plain sight. And I went over to the cabinet, I opened it up, I pulled it out, I set it on the counter, and I looked at it, and it was a half gallon of brandy. And I poured it into a cup, about halfway in a coffee cup, and I downed it. And I never had a chance, Tim. I 100% believe that I was an alcoholic right on the spot, because it was like pouring rocket fuel into me. And it started making all kinds of decisions for me right there on the spot. And so that's how that all started, as far as the drinking and the bad behavior. And so now, there I am, 11. Well, by the time I was a junior in high school, in fact, like the first month of my junior year in 11th grade in high school, they pulled me into the principal's office and they said, "Albin, you're out. You're expelled." And so I left school that day, literally, got in my car and drove and got a job at a grocery store. In fact, the biggest grocery store in the state of California. Now, to back up a little bit here, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Pat used to grow flowers in the backyard. She was amazing. That idea, you have a green thumb. Well, hers was pretty green. We had a pretty good sized backyard, and she had a big L-shaped planter, and she grew some of the most beautiful flowers you've ever seen in your life. And she grew ferns and baby's breath. And I mean, it looked like a florist in our backyard. Well, what she would do, she'd go take those flowers and she'd cut them. And she cut them at an angle, not at the bottom, but at an angle. And the reason she did that is it opened up more surface area for the flower to get water. And then she She was so good at arranging them. They were gorgeous. She would take all these colors, she would match them perfectly. She'd put a fern or baby's breath in it. She'd tie them up for me, and then she'd put it in a bucket. She'd put water in that bucket, and here's the secret. She put about that much 7-Up or Sprite into that bucket. And what did that do? Well, it caused the flowers to live like for 2 weeks. Our flowers, my mom's flowers, where they would buy these flowers for me on the street corner, lived much longer than if they bought them from a florist. So I started selling flowers on the street corner at a young age. About the same time, I also got a paper route. So I was a kid, and that's a business. Because you have to do it every day, right? You have to go to the place where you get your papers. It's 7 days a week. You got to fold them. You got to put a rubber band around them. You got to load them into your saddlebags. You got to put your saddlebags on your bicycle. And then you got to go through the neighborhood and deliver all those papers. You have to collect all the money. You have to go knock on doors when a new person would, move into the neighborhood and get them signed up. I mean, it was a business. I was an entrepreneur at 11 years old. Didn't know that, but yeah, and I loved it. And the interesting thing, Tim, is here's what it told me. Here's what I learned. Valuable lesson at a young age. There's lots of money out there. Go get it. Because I also lived across the street from a golf course, right? And so what do golfers do? Well, they hit balls over the fence all the time, and they don't go get them. Well, I did. I'd ride my bike around the perimeter of the golf course. I'd find these golf balls. I'd bring them home. I'd clean them up. And I would go back to the golf course, and I would take the boxes that the golf balls came in out of the trash. I would put all my golf balls in this tray, in this box, and I'd line them up like all the Titleist and Max Flies and Dunlops, and I'd go back into the parking lot of the golf course, and I'd sell the golf balls back to the golfers. So again, you know what I mean? I just had a really driven entrepreneurial spirit at a young age. And so once I got, kicked out of high school and I'm working, things just progressed. It got worse. I was making money. Heck, I had to, because by the time I was in high school, I was not only drinking, not only was I an alcoholic, but I was a drug addict. I started doing cocaine. I started doing heroin. I started doing hard drugs. And, that's not a road you want to get on unless you want to lead to a town called nowhere, because that's the only place it's going to get you. And so I got married to my childhood sweetheart. That marriage only lasted less than a month. Then I married another woman, Betsy, who was an amazing, amazing woman who got me out of California and got me out here on the East Coast. But she looked at me one day and said, David, I can't do this, right? I'm an alcoholic. I'm a drug addict, and I'm not a nice guy. I'm a nice guy sometimes, but not consistently, that's for sure. And I wouldn't want to be around myself when I'm drinking and drugging. I mean, so why would she? So, so that marriage fell apart. And then I got married to my third wife, who was a bartender. And I married her because she had 3 kids. And I thought, you know what? If I marry her with 3 kids, I'll settle down and I'll get this alcohol drug addiction under control. Well, it looked really good on paper, but I never did. And so to move this forward, on June 8th, of 1988, when I woke up that morning, that was it. I'd hit threshold. I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm done. And Tim, I was in so much pain. I was in so much physical and emotional pain, including spiritual disconnect. And I said, that's it. I'm not living like this anymore. It ends today. I'm out. I'm not going to do this. And so the only way out that I thought in that moment was to put a bullet in my head, commit suicide. And so I loaded my pistol. At this point of the marriage, I'm living in the basement. The family's living upstairs to stay away from me. Well, as I load the pistol and I put it in my mouth, it dawns on me that if I pull that trigger, my pain and suffering is going to stop right there. Because I wasn't thinking about whether there's a heaven or hell or God. Nah, none of that's on my mind. I don't care. I'm in a lot of pain. I want it to stop. But it dawns on me when I pull that trigger, you know what else? Who else I'm killing? Those 3 kids upstairs. And I love those kids. And even though they were my stepkids, I'm like, you can't do that, man. That's wrong. You have to figure out another way, pal. Don't do that. Because, when you do that, we know, what does suicide do? You kill everybody around you. And so I knew the cops would come and the morgue and this and that. It would be all over the news and it would permeate through their school. And again, I knew it would totally devastate those 3 kids' lives. So I'm like, so what else are you going to do? If you can't commit suicide, you got to have to do something because you can't live like this. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And all of a sudden the thought popped in my head, well, why don't you call Alcoholics Anonymous? Well, you know what's really, really interesting about that is that I didn't know who AA was. I had no idea. None. I'd never been to an AA meeting. I didn't know anybody that was going to AA. And to this day, I have no other idea how that idea got in my head other than it was divine. Because again, I'd never even heard of AA. So I did. I called it Alcoholics Anonymous. And this wonderful woman who saved my life got me on the phone, and I affectionately, I refer to her as Madge. And the reason I do that is because she talked like this. You know, she probably smoked 2 packs of Pall Mall non-filters a day. And man, I tell you what, she was brutal. She was in my face. And the interesting part about her was that she was the gatekeeper. It was her responsibility. She's the one that would make a decision to send somebody to come pick you up. I mean, that's just how that worked. And so she did. And she sent an incredible guy by the name of Lauren to come pick me up. And so he took me to AA. And I went to 4 meetings that day. I went to a 12:30, a 4:30, a 6:30, and an 8:30 meeting. And he stayed with me all day. A perfect stranger. Never met me in his life, and yet knew I was in really bad shape and needed a lot of help, and he stayed with me all day. Well, the other thing that happened was during the meeting, they gave me what's called a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. They took the book, and on the front cover or the front page, when you opened it up, they wrote, before you take that first drink, call one of us. And they all wrote their first name only and their telephone number. And then they gave me the book. And so I went home that night, and I didn't take a drink. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang, and it's John from AA. And he's a really, really fun, enthusiastic guy. This guy's amazing. And he's like, hey, Dave, good morning. How you doing? And I'm like, how do you think I'm doing? I'm miserable. I want to kill somebody. And I might start with you, pal. And he's a really fun guy, right? He's like, yeah, Dave. Yeah, I hear you. He said, hey, man, listen, last night you told me where you lived. I know where you live. You're right around the corner from me. Let me do this. Let me come pick you up. Let's go to breakfast. Let me take you to breakfast, and then we'll go to an AA meeting. And that's how it started, Tim. These men, it was an all men's group. They just put their arms around me, and they loved me and took care of me. They knew I was a super, super sick young man, and they loved me until I could love myself. And so one day turned into 2 days turned into a week turned into a month. And then at 1 month, they gave me a chip. Looks something like this. It said 1 month of continuous sobriety. And then they gave me one for 2 months. They gave me one for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 1 year. And this last June 8th, I just picked up this chip for 35 years. Well, that's where the personal development came into my life. The same time I was getting sober in AA. And the reason is because I had insomnia. And so I was up late at night all the time. And so there I am, 3 o'clock in the morning, one morning, and there he is, Mr. Enthusiasm, right? A young Tony Robbins is selling a program called Personal Power. It's a 30-day program. And, I didn't even like the guy when I first heard him. He was all motivated and I wasn't motivated. And he was really encouraging, but he said a couple things that really got me. One of them, he said, we'll do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. And man, that really resonated with me because that's why I drank and did drugs. I was trying to find some pleasure or I was trying to deal with pain. And so it made a lot of sense to me. And then here's what got me. He said the driving forces in our life, where we make our decisions, we're motivated out of inspiration or desperation. And I was feeling pretty desperate. And so I bought the program. And they sent it to me. And to date this, you'll like this. It came on these little white things called cassette tapes. And so there it was. You know, and when he sent it to me, I opened up the box, I plugged them in, I did what the man taught me to do. And within a very short amount of time, I started making some really good decisions. The marriage that I was in was already done with. It was already over. It was just a matter of, you know, the exit strategy. So we got out of that. I started working out. I started losing weight. I started a business, a chauffeur school. And so there were so many things that were happening that were good in my life. Well, one of my buddies in AA is watching me. He's paying attention to me. And he comes up to me one day and he said, "Hey, man," he goes, "what's going on with you? You know, why are you so motivated? You're all encouraging. You know, you look good. You lost a bunch of weight. You started that business." He said, what else are you doing other than AA? You know, and I go, "Well, I've been listening to this guy by the name of Tony Robbins." And he goes, "Hey, I know who Tony Robbins is. I've got his book." He goes, "Yeah, but I never read it." I said, "Well, listen, man, I've got this program and it worked. And I'll tell you what, if you'll promise me that you'll listen to it and go through the program, I'll loan it to you." And he said, "I absolutely promise." And I said, "Great, here it is." So I gave it to him and he went through it too. Well, this is all happening in 1988, 1989. 7 years later, 1995, my phone rings. And guess who it is? It's my buddy Dan that went through the program. And he said, "Hey, man, hey, I'm calling you, man." He goes, "Did you know that Tony Robbins is coming to town?" And I said, "No, man, I had no idea." And he goes, "Oh, man, come on, go with me. I mean, let's go see him live. What a great opportunity." And I said, "Well, what's the dates?" And he gave it. And I go, "Okay, I'm available." And he goes, "Oh, fantastic. So you'll go?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely, I'll go. I'd love to see Tony." He goes, "Great. Let me make the arrangements. Let me call you back." Well, he calls me back like an hour later. And he goes, "Done. Here's what they told us to do. We're going to pick up the tickets at will call." And they gave us some suggestions of what to do. Number one, he said, "Bring snacks because we're going to spend a lot of time in the room." Man, what an understatement that was. And then he said, "Hydrate, drink a lot of water. And you can even bring water to the seminar. Make sure you stay fully hydrated." And then he said, and bring a good attitude and be ready to play full out." And I said, "Well, Dan, how much was the ticket?" And he said, $695. And I'm like, $700? He goes, "Yeah, don't worry about it." He goes, "You can pay me back." And I go, "Yeah, well, that's not the point. You know, I mean, you know, you're asking me to play full out. If I spent $700, don't you worry. I'll play full out." Well, you know, and just as he's getting ready to get off the phone, he goes, "Oh, wait, I forgot to tell you something super important. We're going to be doing a firewalk." And I remember thinking, "Oh, hell no. No, 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 no. Maybe you're going to do a firewalk, but I'm not going to be doing any firewalk." Now, this is all going into my head, right? I'm not saying this to Dan. I'm thinking it, right? And you know what's interesting about that, Tim, is I didn't even know what a firewalk was. I had no idea what that even meant, but I said no to it. And that's the interesting point. Fear was controlling my life, and it had been controlling my life my entire life. And so a firewalk didn't sound like anything I wanted to do. And so I'm saying no, but I don't let Dan know that. I'm like, "Yeah, sure, Dan, sure. Firewalk sounds interesting. Okay, man, I'll see you when we go." And hung up the phone. And so that the big day comes for the event. And so we get there. And by the way, is this, you want me to tell this part now?
I'll tell you what, let's have a bit of a chat. I was hook, line and sinker there. Right, now you've gone racing ahead way beyond where I wanted you to go. But can we just go back a little bit to, I mean, you were 5-year-old, you were in California, in Hollywood, and then you moved to
Long
where'd you
Beach.
move to? Long Beach,
California.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so that's like not far from where all the stars and all that Hollywood malarkey goes on, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very close.
All the studios and everything. Now,
Oh yeah.
how much can you remember of sort of leading up to you moving in with your aunt and uncle at the time?
I mean, I have like little sound bites of memory from before that, but not much. Um, I don't remember any of it as bad. I remember a little apartment, and I remember mom scratching my back. When they told me I was adopted, when Pat and Bob told me I was adopted, they went on to tell me that your Aunt Dean, and I'm like, yeah, and they're like, well, she's actually, that's your mom. And I remember thinking, I don't even like her. And the reason I didn't like her is because when she was around me, she was always touching me. And not inappropriate, just she wanted to sit next to me. She wanted to hug me. She wanted to kiss me. She wanted to hold me. Well, duh. I'm her son. Who wouldn't, right? But I didn't understand the connection. I didn't know what was going on, other than I just thought it was kind of weird, right? No, I
And what
understand it
about
today, obviously.
yeah? And what about your brothers? You got two older
My
brothers.
half brothers. Yeah, I never really connected with them much at all. I don't remember much of what was going on there at that time. I don't remember them being all that nice to me. And we later in life, when my biological mom got sick and couldn't live by herself anymore, I took her from California and I moved her to my house because I was living on a farm in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. So we brought her there. So she got to spend her last days with me and my wife and her grandkids. So that was a really good thing. But my old, and they're my half brothers. Remember, right? We both had separate fathers, same mother, different fathers. Needless to say, both of them I was pretty disappointed in the way they didn't show up when mom passed. So there wasn't really much of a relationship when it came to that. I've been asked before, were there any other kids? Did my father have a relationship with any other women where I would have had other half brothers and sisters? And my answer to that is I don't know. What I do know is that when we moved mom to my house out in the farm, when she passed, she had a bunch of stuff, and so we went through it, right? And there was a like a not really a book, but kind of like a magazine thick type book, and it was on pilots of Korea. And when I found it, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be able to see a picture of my dad, right? Because I've never seen him, never met him, no pictures, nothing, right? And so I'm like, I'm really excited. So I open up this, and again, it was just about this one fighter squadron, pilot. And so I went through it. I had his name because his name's on my certificate of live birth, Jonathan Eisler. And so I looked through there and I didn't find anything, Tim. And I'm like, well, I'm not all that good at it. So I gave it to my wife, who's really good at finding stuff. She went through it. We must have went through that book what felt like 100 times. Never found anything. So I'm like, so why did mom have this book? It was like confusing to me. And so I've made peace with that part as far as me never going to be able to see my dad or see a picture of him or any of that. And, I made a really good decision. I chose gratitude. I chose to honor him, and he did the best he could do with what he had. And without him, I'm not here today. And so again, I honor his life, and so it's been a big help to me.
Yeah. So just looking back again, then, From when you moved in with your step parents till sort of the age of 11, what was the
Yes.
schooling like at that sort of time? What was your life like at that time?
Um, it was really good. I grew up on a street where we had a bunch of kids. There was like 40 of us on this block, on this one street. It's called Belize Street in East Long Beach, California. And I'm friends with most of those people today. My best friend is there, and all my other buddies, and we had two guys that grew up on our street that ended up playing pro football in the U.S. So that was good, but when I became 11 and they started drinking, my education and my focus, if you will, deteriorated quite drastically.
Mm.
And so I just, I barely got by. And again, as I said earlier, Tim, by the time I was a junior, it was over. And I didn't care. I wasn't into school. I was already making money at a young age. So I was already with this mindset that there's nothing they're going to teach me here in high school that's going to help me make money or make me a better person in life. So I didn't care. I was fine with it. Though I was drinking and drugging, but at the end of the day, there was nowhere for the weary there as far as, me being concerned about getting kicked out of high school.
So your step parents, when they told you at the age of 11, did they explain why they were telling you at that age?
No, they did not.
They didn't give a
And that's a great
reason.
question. Yeah, really, right? Like why? Why would you tell him at 11?
Yeah.
What?
Why not wait until
I
you're
mean,
18?
when? Yeah, well, yeah, and when do you tell them, right? So apparently that something caused them to want to tell me then. I mean, could you wait till I was 16? I don't know, maybe 18. I don't know, whatever. The bottom line is they told me when they told me, and it affected me the way it did. And I believe everything happens the way it's supposed to. And I'll tell you something really cool that happened to me because I made peace with my dad, my father, my biological father. A couple of years ago, I'm over here in Boone, North Carolina, and I'm out to dinner with my son, Dave Jr. And we're sitting there, and when I go out to dinner, I love taking care of the servers, right? Because my mom was a server and she worked really hard, so I'm really kind to them, and I tip really well, and I talk to them, and I have conversation with them, and you know the saying, right? People forget what you did, they forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So I try to make them feel really cool. Really wonderful. So we're having a lot of fun with the server, and I'm sitting there eating, and all of a sudden I look up and I look back and I go, oh my gosh, I'm having dinner with my dad's grandson. And in that moment, Tim, I could see my dad. And it was
Wow.
an absolute magical moment in my life. And I truly believe, had I not been open to, being okay and forgiveness and reconciliation, if you will, with my dad, I would have never had that moment. So it was very, very magical. And again, I think it was a huge gift that was given to me because I did, I was peaceful and grateful, to my biological father.
Yeah. What happened to your step parents? Have you ever had that conversation with them since?
No, they're
Since
both
you got.
passed. My mom, Pat Albin's been gone for many years. We lost Pat back in the 70s. Bob passed away not too long after that, a few years after that. I did do something really cool that helped me. I went to both of their graves and I took a chip. I took my 10-year chip to my dad's grave. My dad's buried in what's called Arlington West. Obviously, you have Arlington National Cemetery in
Yeah.
Washington, D.C., in Arlington. Well, that cemetery is full, right? So they created one in Riverside, California, and my dad's buried there. Well, my best friend's dad is literally buried. I mean, my buddy Carl can go stand over at his dad's grave, and I can stand at my dad's grave, and we can see each other. I mean, I could throw a football to it. So I went to his grave, and I took my 10-year chip, and I put it at my dad's grave, and I put it at his headstone, and I made peace with him. In his alcoholism. I did the same thing for my mom, for Pat. I went to her grave and I took a 5-year chip and I put my 5-year AA chip at her grave. And it was a really, really wonderful experience to be able to do that.
Mm. So moving up a little bit, then looking at when you first you had that light bulb moment where you just had enough and you decided that you need to stop drinking. How difficult did you find those early days? Because I mean, you obviously go through DTs, you go through all of that, and the desperation at those times, where you're desperate for a drink or desperate for a fix. How did you combat that?
You know what, Tim? I have no idea. I just don't. Because I was battling alcohol, which alcohol will kill you, in withdrawals, the DTs, delirium tremors, and cocaine and heroin. You stack that on top of it. It was really one thing, and that was the men of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't go anywhere other than that men's group. It was called the Stepping Stones Group, still is. Stepping Stones Group of Alcoholics Anonymous in Northern Virginia. And I just hooked up with a bunch of amazing men who held on to me really tight. I mean, I went to 3 to 4 meetings every day for at least a year. I went to a couple of meetings a day for a couple of years. Withdrawals were horrible. I was talking to somebody about this the other day on another podcast, and one of the things I remember is they told me to eat a lot of chocolate and take vitamin C and vitamin B12. And so I did that. I drank a lot of water, and I drank good water. I drank, spring water. But yeah, there were times when I would curl up on a couch with a blanket, and I was shaking. I was cold. I was literally physically coming apart. I should have probably gone to rehab, right? And they monitor my vitals, but it wasn't really available, back in 1988, the way it is today. But how I did it, I don't know, because the chances of making it are not good. They're just not. And I don't even want to talk about the statistics, and I don't even want to talk about, what were the odds. But, obviously, I believe, here's what I believe, Tim, and that is, I believe that the 2 most important times in any human's life is the moment they're born and the moment they figure out why. And somewhere in that first year, I was learning that there was a higher calling for me. Because one of the things I became really good at was a gatekeeper of AA. I loved it when a new man walked through the door, because I had been given so much love and so much attention, and so much guidance and wisdom and knowledge and what to do, and the steps and just everything, right? When those men told me to do something, I did it. I didn't question it. I may have fought back a little bit, but not much. And so I was completely immersed in AA. And so I became a really great gatekeeper, and I fell in love with helping other alcoholics achieve sobriety. Because one of the things it says in the preamble that I live by this creed and this code to this day is it says, when anyone anywhere reaches out, I want the hand of AA to be there. And for that, I'm responsible. And I've taken that to heart. So it drove me. It definitely drove me.
Brilliant. So let's bring it forward to this little bit of malarkey with the hot coals and stuff like that. So
absolute malarkey.
So you got the Tuppence halfpenny going to go to this meeting with Tony Robbins, and got a firewalk.
Yep. So here we go. It's the day of the event, right? And so we get there, and Tony took the stage at 2:00 in the afternoon, and the next thing I know, Tim, it's after midnight, right? We've been in a room for 10 hours with Tony Robbins. Now, remember earlier I said bring snacks, right? Well, if you didn't bring snacks, you'd starve to death. And so we're sitting in there, and all of a sudden Tony goes, "Take your shoes off." And I'm like, "Oh no, I see where you're going with that one, mister. You're not tricking me." Well, here's the problem. I'm in a room with 3,500 people. And guess what they're doing?
All taking their shoes off.
They're taking their shoes off. And I'm like, no, people, don't fall for it.
You're the odd one
go
out.
towards the light. And so now I've got a dilemma. What am I going to do? Right? Because if I don't take my shoes off, because what he's doing, he's preparing you to take you out into this big parking lot where this firewalk's going to take place, right? And so I'm like, well, hey, man, if you don't take your shoes off, everybody's going to be going, hey, look at the guy over there. He won't take his shoes off. He's a coward, So I'm like, I'm having this conversation in my head. I'm like, calm down. Just take your shoes off. And when you get out there, just go hide in the back. No one's going to know. Well, except for you. I'm going to know, but that's okay. So that's my strategy. Well, it gets worse. Because when Tony gets everybody to start to going out there, he gets them all to start clapping and chanting. Right? So now you've got 3,500 people walking out to the firewalk going, yes, 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 right? And it gets worse. Because once you get outside into the parking lot, guess what he's got? African drummers. And it's intense, right? It's dun, 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 dun. And everybody's clapping. Yes, yes. I mean, Tim, it is a dog and pony show like anything you've ever seen, right? Well, when you get out there, over in the corner, there's a giant fire. It's huge. It's 30 feet wide, and it's probably 70 feet long. And it's been burning all day, right? So they just keep adding wood to it all day long, just cords and cords of wood, hardwood. Well, it renders because at the end of the evening, around midnight, there's this big, giant blue pile of coals. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. You've never seen anything like it, right? It's beautiful. Well, how do you walk 3,500 people? Well, here's what you do. You take wheelbarrows over to that big pit, and you load all those coals in a wheelbarrow. And then you take a wheelbarrow and you pull it in between two lanes of sod, of grass, which is about 3 feet wide, 15, 18 feet long. And then they take a shovel and they just sprinkle those coals on top of that grass, that sod, the turf, I think they call it in the UK. And that's what you walk on. Well, I'm having none of that because where am I? Whoop, I'm in the back. I'm hiding out. Well, Tony knows that the Firewalk is probably, without a doubt, one of the most life-changing experiences that any human will ever go through. Period. It's just the way that works. The paradigm shift is in stepping through your fear and doing what you don't want to do. And so he knows there's people like me. He knows where we are, too. We're all hiding in the back. It's pretty predictable. So what's he do?
Comes to the back, gets you.
Find you. Oh, come on, Tony, really? And so I'm back there thinking I got it all figured out. I'm going to hide out. It's all good. I've avoided this thing. And all of a sudden, here he comes. And he makes eye contact with me. I'm pretty sure Tony trains him to say, listen, when you make eye contact with these people, don't take your eyes off of them. And so he makes eye contact with me. And so he's coming at me, right? And he gets about 20 feet from me. And he looks at me kind of funny, like there's something wrong with me, right? And he goes, hey, man, are you okay? And when we're not okay, what do we say?
I'm fine.
I'm fine. We lie. Oh, I'm fine. All good here, man. Move along. Nothing to see here. And all of a sudden he goes, well, hey, man, are you going to walk tonight? And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, didn't you get the memo? What's wrong with you? And he goes, and I'm like in his face, right? I'm like, absolutely not. And he goes, hey, man, that's cool. Not a problem. He goes, hey, listen, we don't want you to do anything you don't want to do. And I'm like, oh, okay. I liked hearing that, right? And here's where it comes. Here's a stranger. Tim, I don't know who this guy is to this day. I have no clue. But without him, I'm not sitting here on your podcast today. I can tell you that. This perfect stranger changes my life with one question. And here's the question he asked me. Wouldn't you at least like to watch? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Let's do that. I'd love to watch these people burn their feet off. That'll be entertaining. And he goes, well, listen, man, you're way over here. You're way back. You know, you're not going to be able to see anything from back here. He's telling me the truth. He said, you're going to just get in line, and eventually you'll get up there to where you can see it. Right? He's telling the truth. I'm going to defend him here because he is, because I can't. I'm 100 yards away. I can't see anything. I got 3,000 people standing in front of me. I can hear it. They're all clapping and chanting, yes, yes, and the drums are dun, 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 and the fire's going on, and people are already doing it, and they're screaming, and they're yelling, and they're celebrating. I mean, it is unlike anything you've ever experienced in your entire life. It is super, super intense. So fine, I get in line, and I'm just kind of walking along, and walking along, and walking along, and all of a sudden this guy comes up to me, and he whispers in my ear, and he says, he knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go. And pew, this guy just disappeared into the night. And I'm like, what was that? Who was that? What was that about? It's like crazy. And so I'm walking along. And again, I got hundreds of people in front of me. I can't see anything. I can hear it. Believe me, you can hear it. But I get to a point, and all of a sudden I can see at an angle. And Tim, they're doing it. Every race, every creed, every color, they're walking on fire. And my brain is going, what? Why? Why would they do this? You know, metaphorically, what's going on? This makes no sense. Mammals are trained to run from fire, and they're walking across it. And so I've got no references. And I can't stop staring at it. It's like, you know, when you drive by an accident, you're not supposed to look at it, but we all stare at it. Well, that's kind of, I'm in a zone, right? I'm in this, I can't take my eyes off it. And all of a sudden I'm looking, next thing, boom, guess where I am?
Right at the front of the queue.
I'm at the front of the line. And there I am. And I'm staring into the abyss, right? I'm looking at that fire lane. It's 3 feet wide, you know, it's 15, 18 feet long. The coals are on top. They're bright red. The wheelbarrow's there. You can feel all the heat coming off of it. And my heart is pounding out of my chest. I think it's going to jump out of my chest any moment. And there's a trainer standing right there. And all of a sudden the trainer goes, eyes up. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Okay. My eyes are up. That's right, Dave. Really good. Good job there. You're in a room with Tony Robbins for 10 hours. And guess what he teaches you to do? Keep your eyes up. Apparently, I'm a slow learner. So now my eyes are up, and all of a sudden the trainer goes, squeeze your fist and say yes. And I went, yes. And he went, stronger. And I went, yes. Well, he could tell. He knew. I was not in a peak state, and he knew it. So what's he do? He screams at me, stronger. I threw my hands in the air, and I went, yes. And he goes, go, go, go. Well, remember when the other guy came up to me and said, he knows when you're ready? When he says go, you go. I took off. Well, oh, man. And here's the first thing I learned about firewalking. The very first thing I learned. When you take the first step, oh, you'll take the second, third, fourth, and fifth. I absolutely guarantee it. You are not going to stop. Well, they position two guys at the end of the fire lane that lock arms to stop you and catch you, right? Otherwise, I'd have walked all the way to Albuquerque. They stopped me, and they're like, stop, wipe your feet and celebrate. And so I'm wiping my feet, and I'm celebrating, and all of a sudden it dawns on me. I've burnt myself really, really bad, super bad. And I look at my foot, and it's dirty, but there's no burns. Oh, it's my other foot. It's dirty too, but there's no burns. And so now I'm down there, I'm celebrating. You got 3,000 people down there. They're all jumping up and down and high-fiving. In that moment, you got 3,500 people, and we all believe one thing. We can do anything. You know, where's the bus? Take us to Mount Everest. We're ready to climb it. Well, and you know what's interesting? When I look back, I walked on coals that were 1,000 degrees, but I don't know how I did it. None. I have no idea. How can you walk on coals that are 1,000 degrees and not burn yourself? It makes no sense. But, you know, ever done that? I think we've all done this, right? We did something really cool, something we would have never believed that we can do. And we don't even know how we did it, but we take credit for it. We're like, that's right. That's this guy right here. I did that. Well, that's kind of like that evening. So, but here's where it gets super, super interesting. Here's where it gets really, really entertaining, as far as I'm concerned, was the next day. This is a 4-day event that Tony's having. This is day one. The night of is when we do the Firewalk. So now we're on day 2, and you've got 3,500 people who were all on time that next morning. Very interesting. Very few stragglers. They couldn't wait to be back there that next morning to see what's next. And I'm standing in the foyer with 3,500 people getting ready to go into the venue. And Tim, I've never seen anything like it in my life. There were 3,500 people communicating humanistically, unlike anything I've ever seen or experienced in my life. The people are laughing and they're crying. They're telling their stories. They're talking about the Firewalk. I mean, it was a beautiful thing to not only be there and be part of it, but just to watch it and witness it. And I'm like, so did we drink the Kool-Aid last night? Is that what happened? Is that because of this Firewalk? Is that why we're all super connected today? Well, yeah, right? Because what did it do? It raised our self-belief, our self-confidence, our self-worth. So our vibration came up with it. And so, yeah, so now we're 3,500 people that think we can accomplish anything. Well, later in the event, I met one of Tony's trainers, a guy by the name of Ted Macy. Super guy, love him to death. Him and his wife, Mary, both trainers for Tony. And I'm just talking to this guy, right? And I mentioned, I'm like, so this must be really awesome that you get to come and be in this environment and exposed to all this encouragement and positivity and, you know, the energy of all this. And he goes, oh, yeah. He goes, I get to do this, 6, 8, 10 times a year. I go, oh, man, that would really be awesome. And he goes, well, tell you what. He goes, you see all those people over there with their black shirts and the pink writing on the back? Yeah. He goes, they're volunteers, man. They're just like you. They were here at an event, and they come back to be part of it and to help out. He goes, so listen, man, when you get home, call Robbins Research in San Diego. Tell them you want a volunteer crew application. They'll send you one. And they did. I filled it out. I sent it back. And like 9 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. And it said, Dave Albin, congratulations. You've been selected to crew with the Tony Robbins companies in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Well, guess what? My foot's in the door. And it just snowballed. I crewed about 5 or 6 times. In your application, they look at, who you are, what you do, what your experience is, all that. Number one, I had a military background. Number two, I had a security background. So they decided to put me on the security detail to help take care of some of Tony's celebrities. The other thing they did is because I lived on a farm, I knew how to use tools. I knew how to use a log splitter. I knew how to drive a tractor. And so they put me on the fire building team, which is exactly what I wanted. And so now I'm doing both. Well, I think it was in 96, right? After I crewed 5 or 6 times, they hired me as a subcontractor. You got to pay your way. If you're a volunteer, Tim, you have to take care of everything, right? You have to pay your way. You have to pay for your hotel, your airfare, your food, your travel expense, all of it. So you're spending a couple $1,000s a time every time you go, which my wife was not happy about. She's like, who in the hell is this Tony Robbins guy that you're spending $2,000 every time, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year? Well, wait a minute here, hold on. So when I became a subcontractor, I got a free ticket, and I took her to an event, to a Firewalk. And when she graduated at the end of day 4, we're walking on the beach, and she looked at me and she goes, "Okay, I get it. You want to run with this guy. You want to work with this guy. You want to follow him, go with him, help him, support him. Go. I get it. I totally understand." And so when I became subcontractor, they started paying for all that, right? They paid my airfare, my hotel, my per diem, food and all that. And then I became the assistant captain in like 96, 97. And then in 2003, Tony offered me the fire captain position, which meant that I would take over all of this Firewalks globally. And at first I had to say no because I homeschooled my kids. I didn't want to be away from them for those long periods of time. And they stepped right up and said, we'll pay to have your kids travel with us. And so there I am, right? My wife, my kids, we're on the road with Tony Robbins full time. In fact, my first event where I got to take my kids was Sydney, Australia. So,
Wow.
yeah, right. What a beautiful experience for them. That's all happening in 2003. 2005, we came over to your neck of the woods. We came to London. We went over into, I guess that's the western part of the city, where the Docklands
Yeah,
are,
Docklands
where
is in the west or the eastern part of London.
eastern part, East London,
Yeah, East
where the
End
Excel
is the
Center.
Docklands. Yeah,
Yeah.
know it
And
well.
so, yeah. And so we went to the Excel Center, huge facility, as you probably know. And we set a world record. That's where we firewalked 12,300 people. Now, I say it's a world
Amazing.
record, Tim. I wanted full disclosure here. The Guinness Book of World Records was not there. They didn't document any of it. And to my knowledge, there's no firewalk that came anywhere close to that in the world. The only other firewalk that comes anywhere close to that is another Tony Robbins seminar where we firewalked 11,000 or 10,000, whatever. So that was the world record, and so we just went along. I was just part of that for many, many years, and then in 2014, I had a pretty extraordinary thing happen to me. I got a very interesting phone call. We got a phone call from Google, and they wanted to know if I'm the Dave Albin that does the firewalks for Tony Robbins. Well, yes, I am. What can I do for you? And they're like, well, if you're not under any contractual obligation or non-compete, we'd like to talk to you about doing a gig for us. And I'm like, well, homeboy's a free agent. What you got going on, guys? And they originally wanted to do a firewalk, but they wanted to do it in the middle of the day. Can't do a firewalk in the middle of the day. Not, at least I won't facilitate one. It's a safety issue. I need to see the color of the coals. And I need to work with those coals, and I can only do that at night. I said, but I tell you what we could do. We could do a glass walk. And so they had 148 executives that had gone through a 9-month curriculum, and they wanted to anchor this experience in. And they wanted to have a nice lunch, and they were going to have some drinks, and they were going to, graduate and get their certificates, and then they were going to anchor it in with the fire or with the glass walk. So when I told them glass walk, they're like, glass walk? You mean like walking on broken glass? And I'm like, yeah. They go, ooh, tell us about that. So Google ended up hiring me to do 2 glass walks. And then from there, the next thing I know, Tim, I'm at NASA. I'm at Notre Dame. I'm at Chick-fil-A, Microsoft, Heineken, Remax, the EO organization, the YMCA. I mean, my career just snowballed. And I mean, and it even got better. The next thing I know, I'm on the Tim Heale podcast. I mean, so,
There you go.
Right,
you'd hit the heights now.
Yeah. So I've arrived.
You the man.
Absolutely.
Terrific. So in all those years that you've been facilitating people walking on hot coals and glass, have you had any injuries?
Well, let me talk about the firewalk first. The coals are 1,000 degrees. Can you burn yourself? Duh.
Yeah.
Now, I've walked a few 100,000 people. I've lost count. I lost count a long time ago. Has anyone ever come to one of my events and needed to go to the hospital? No. Has anybody ever burnt themselves really bad? Not to my knowledge. So, can you get a kiss? Can you get a little burn on your foot? Yeah, of course you can. I've gotten them. But they're gone in 24 hours. So I call them little badges of honor anyway, right? But has anyone ever been seriously hurt? Absolutely not. Not even close. I mean, I know it sounds really dangerous, but it's really not, right? Put your kids in soccer. That's really dangerous. Put your kids in football. That's really dangerous. Take your family to the beach or to the lake and get them really sunburned. That's really dangerous. It's actually pretty safe. And again, yes. Can you get a little kiss on the bottom of your foot? Yes. Put a little Sensodyne on it, or put a little Neosporin on it, and it's literally gone in 24 hours. So, but the upside of walking on coals that are 1,000 degrees are like, you step into your superpower. As far as the glass, 2 people have been cut. Happy to share about it on your show. The first one, my son. We're in Paris. We're setting a world record glass walk, over 1,500 people. So the glass walk, when people step on it, glass will crack and little shards will bounce out onto the ground, right? Well, a little piece had popped out onto the ground. My son didn't see it. And he's wearing, how the kids today, they wear these pants with the holes in the knees and then all over the place, right? He's got a hole in his knee. Guess what he did? He put his knee down on that little piece of glass. He cut his knee. So that was the first one, which I'm very proud that my son was the first one to cut his foot, or cut his knee. The other one, we were in Montreal. And when we teach people to do this, we tell everybody very specifically, do not step off of that glass until we inspect your foot. And then we're going to take a brush and we're going to brush off your feet really, really well to make sure there's no glass stuck to your foot. So that when you step off the glass and onto the surface, which could be carpet, it could be concrete, it could be asphalt, it could be wherever we are, right? Well, this woman got to the end and she was so excited, she decided to celebrate early. So she jumped off the glass before we had a chance to inspect her foot and wipe her foot off. Well, they took her back. This particular event is in Canada, and they always have an EMT there, paramedic EMT, just for safety purposes, which is all good. We're good with that. Well, she's back there being treated, and this EMT, he put a little Neosporin on it, put a Band-Aid on it. Right? She's fine. And so I went up and talked to her, and I said, "So how you doing?" She goes, "I'm fine." I'm like, "So what happened?" She goes, "I didn't follow your instructions." I said, "Okay, well, what'd you do?" She goes, "I celebrated too early." And I said, "So how often does that show up in your life?" And she goes, "All the freaking time." And she didn't use the word freaking. I said, "So are we good? Did you learn your lesson?" She goes, "I sure did." And she said, "Thank you." Sweet lady.
Brilliant.
But it was the lesson that she needed to learn. I learned as much from that moment from her as she did. I wish, I like, and I'm glad you asked me, because I like sharing the story, because there it is. How do we learn? We do dumb stuff. Or we do things that, we probably didn't do right, or we need to correct it. I mean, it's the way we learn. If you tell your child not to touch the stove because it's hot and they go do it and they burn their hand, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That's a good thing. There's two ways to learn. There's an easy way to learn and there's a hard way to learn. That's right. Most people pick the hard way.
And learn from the mistakes of others, right?
Absolutely.
So, back to your question. No, Tim, nobody, you're not going to get hurt at one of my firewalks or one of my glass walks or any of my experiences. Let me tell you what we are going to do, where my focus is, because where intention goes, energy flows, right? So my focus is to create one of the top experiences of your life. And for you to get to the moment, just like I did, where fear had been controlling your life all the way up into a certain point. Right? When I did that firewalk that night, fear had been controlling everything, every decision I made, everything I had, or and the many things that I didn't have were all influenced by fear. So fear changed for me. It went from forget everything and run, or, well, there's other words you can use too, to face everything and rise. Or as we like to say in AA, false images appearing real.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So bring us right up to date. What are you doing nowadays?
Well, in 2014, after that, I retired from Tony's companies, which was a really great moment. We had a really great talk, Tony and I. We just sat and talked and laughed and cried and enjoyed all that we had been through. And so Firewalk Productions was born in 2014. So no pun intended. Well, maybe a little, but we've been going hot and heavy ever since. So basically, companies come to me when one of three things is going on. Number one, they're completely breakdown. They're in big trouble. Everybody's fighting. They're arguing over masks. They're arguing over vaccines. They're arguing over, I love Donald Trump. I hate Donald Trump. I mean, shut up. You better stop. As a CEO, you better fix that. Because if you don't fix that, your production, you know where it's going. Because is production going to be at an all-time high when people are screaming and yelling at each other, or where they're getting along like a finely tuned soccer team? I mean, come on. We know that, right? So they call me then. They'll call me when things are kind of mediocre. Things aren't really good and they're not bad. They're just kind of in the middle, which is, I believe in life, it's like we're going in a circle. And we're either going up, or we're going in a circle, or we're going down. So this is kind of like when people hire me. Sometimes people hire me when they are kicking butt. That's happening next week. I'm going to MIT in Boston. I got a new client. Amazing. We're super excited about working with these guys, and they're kicking butt right now. And so they're bringing me in to level that up, which is brilliant on that company's part. And so they just hire me, and they bring me in, they write me a check, and we create the paradigm shift in the company, and that's what we do. Something else that we do, Tim, during the Firewalk, I took it up to the next level above what Tony was doing. I include the board break experience with the Firewalk now. So what we do, it's a martial arts move, right? Any martial arts studio you go into, if you graduate in a belt, typically they'll have you break a board. You'll break it with your hand, you break it with your elbow, you break it with your knee, you break it with your foot, and you graduate into the next belt. Well, what I did is take that experience, and I have them write something on front of the board they want to move towards. I have them write something on back of the board they need to move away from. I have them write anybody's name on the board that they're in conflict with. So in other words, if forgiveness or reconciliation is part of that relationship, it ends tonight at the Firewalk. And then I have them write anybody's name on that board that they've lost. And so from an ancestral side, energy-wise, then they can bring that person to the ceremony, which creates more of a rite of passage. So we take them out, they break the board, we circle them, we bring them back, they do the Firewalk, they throw the board in the fire, and it creates definitely one of the most spectacular experiences of any human being's life. So we've done that. The other thing that I'm doing now, it's coming up in October, is called the Dave Albin Firewalk Academy. And what the academy is that where people come and I show them, all my life-changing experiences and, my immersion in the personal development industry for the last 3 decades. So we teach them the Firewalk, the glass walk, the board break, the arrow break, the rebar bend, all the storytelling, how to orchestrate it, how to set it up, all of it. And so that's coming up in October. And this October, we are sold out. And so we've got that going on. So the next academy that people can consider would be in October of 2024. And so typically we have different type, like let's say XYZ Corporation wants to send someone to the academy. And so now we train them, work with them, send them back, and now they can facilitate these experiences in their own company. Same thing if a business owner or an entrepreneur comes to us, same thing. They might be a really big company, have 1,000 employees, they might have 100, they might have 10, but they'll still be able to go back and facilitate these life changes and experiences. And then we get a lot of coaches and trainers, right? Life coaches that are out there helping people, live their best life. And I tell them, look, what doesn't challenge you doesn't change you. You got to get them up to physically do something. You don't become a Navy SEAL by sitting in a classroom. You got to get them up and get them into the ocean where the sharks are. So, yeah, so that's basically, the two operations that we have is the Academy and then Firewalk Productions, where they can come hire us.
Fantastic. So that's right up to date then.
That's up to date. Yep, that's where we are right now.
Brilliant.
Like I said, next week I'll be at MIT in Boston. We're going back there for our second event at MIT, which has been a real honor to go to the Endicott House, which is absolutely in Denham, Massachusetts, which is absolutely spectacular. And then the Academy is coming up the first week of October. So we've got several gigs, on the books for the next. I think we've got bookings that are out as far as a year and a half, not quite a year and a half.
Brilliant. So if somebody wants to come along to one of your events, where do they find all the information?
So where do they find me, huh? Well, best place to go is just go to our website. I mean, we got Facebook page and LinkedIn and all that, but just go to our Facebook page. It's firewalkadventures.com. So Firewalk Adventures is plural with an S. Firewalk Adventures is all one word. And then it's all there. How to get a hold of me. You can set up a discovery call. You can see videos and you can see the different experiences. And again, my calendar's there. So all you have to do is call me up and tell me what's going on. So basically what we do is I customize the experience for that client. Like, I did things a certain way for Tony Robbins. I did them a certain way for T. Harv Eker. I did them a certain way for Google and NASA and so on. So all I need to do is find out what's going on with that company, right? Maybe they're launching a new product. Maybe there's some dissension going on. Maybe they're doing really well. Tell me what your mission statement is, what your vision is, and then we'll incorporate all of that into the experience. I'm really excited about next week when I go to MIT. When I leave MIT, I'm going to go to Bradford, Pennsylvania, and I get to go to a really, really great organization, a company that I love immensely, and it's called the Zippo Lighter Company. And Mark Pomp is the CEO, and I get to go meet him for the first time. And he made our lighters here, I guess you can see, with the flaming feet on it. So I love
terrific.
Zippo, and we can't wait to go.
I suppose you need something to light your fires with.
You gotta light the fire with something. So why not use, hashtag Zippo? Yeah, they're such a great company. I love these guys. They're so amazing. They're so fun. And I get to go there for the first time, and they're going to take me through the tour. I get to go to the plant. I'm like a little kid. I love these guys. When my dad was in the military during World War II, Zippo made lighters for all the GIs in America. Yeah. And they couldn't make them out of steel because they had to reserve the steel for the things to fight the war. So they made them out of brass. And so my dad carried his Zippo lighter all over Europe during World War II. And when he came home, it was sitting on his not his nightstand, but his dresser. And it was sitting in a dish, this Zippo lighter, to the day he died. And there was a little Army emblem that had been, affixed to it.
Embossed on it.
And somehow it broke off. I don't know what happened to it. Who knows? You're fighting a war. Anything can happen. But yeah, so I've always had a real loving, soft spot in my heart for Zippo. So to be able to actually get to go there and meet them all and hang out with them is I'm super, super excited about it. I'm like a little kid. Super excited.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for sharing your story. Truly amazing.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I don't take this lightly because you guys do all the work. You're the host, man. All I have to do is get up here and run my mouth. You guys do all the heavy lifting and all the editing and getting it out there, and so it's always an honor. It's always an honor and always a pleasure. And I did my research about you, and you've got an amazing show going on and a lot of momentum. And so, I'm very, very grateful and very thankful to you, Tim, for having me on your show. So thanks again.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Wow. I'm blown away. What a terrific guest. well, you'll be able to find all the details of Dave's contact details and everything will be in the description. So until the next time, TTFN. Ta-ta for now.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.